52% of all agricultural land worldwide is actually affected by soil degradation, and we're losing 12 million hectares of fertile land to desertification every year. That's actually 2,000 football fields per hour. So if we put them along the Autobahn, you would have to keep 210 kilometers per hour just to keep up as these football fields turn into desert. And that's what I want to do something about. And I know that how to do that is to make a profitable business, stay focused on some key markets in the beginning, build the momentum where the profitability that we drive into desert control will fuel our ability to actually expand into these bigger impact markets.
Today we are talking about a business that is able to make our planet literally greener. With me is Ole Christian Sivertsen, the CEO of Desert Control. Ole, thank you for your time.
Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to speak to you and your audience.
Great. So Ole, why don't you just start by giving us a real brief introduction about Desert Control? I mean, the name basically says it all, right? But maybe you can explain your company to our investor community and what it does to make our planet greener.
Yeah, so Desert Control started out with a dream and a vision back in 2005 by our inventor and co-founder Christian Olesen, who looked at the potential of restoring, the most exposed soils on our planet, the sandy and degraded soils, the desert regions that are actually growing faster than most of us realize. And he looked at sort of how can we do this in an efficient way. He got in contact with someone that were looking to restore some land areas in Egypt. So historically, the Nile Delta used to be one of the most fertile areas in the region. But they went into what's called soil degradation, desertification, and became very barren. And they linked that back to the building of the Aswan Dam, whereas the river used to carry a lot of rich minerals like clays and silt and very fine particles that it used to enrich the riverbanks and the surrounding areas with. And they were looking at how can we actually take those clay minerals that are now building up behind the dam and bring them back to the soil in these areas. That proved to be very challenging. They needed an enormous amount of raw material clay, up to 100 kilograms per square meter of land, which was unsustainable and very labor intensive, and the logistics were just impossible. So Christian, he looked at technologies used in the oil and gas industry for utilizing clay minerals in a much more effective way, and drilling muds and things like that. Those are processes we cannot use in agriculture and in the nature because we use very heavy chemicals for that, but those are closed loop systems. So he invented a process mechanically and through an advanced patented process to actually achieve the same things, where we're delaminating clay structures, turning it into a liquid that we can apply to desert sand. And lo and behold, after this liquid with these minerals goes into the ground, suddenly the structure of that soil changes. So a sandy desert soil performs more similar to a loamy clay soil, or more like the agricultural soils that we're used to here in Germany and Northern Europe, etc. So that's a very brief background on the innovation and what we do.
Great. Thank you, Ole. And maybe before we go in even deeper, we always tell our investors that the CEO is one of the main things you should look at before investing into a company, because in the end, he decides whether you're successful or not with his contacts, with the way he's doing business, right? So maybe you can tell us just a little bit more about you and your background. Why do you think you can make this company, or why do you think you can bring this company to a success?
Well, I am a big believer in purpose, right? So if you are motivated and driven by a purpose and the things that you can actually achieve, which has to include creating a profitable business, but also in a longer and more intrinsic value of actually what we can contribute to change this planet, I think those are important qualities. And just to share a little bit of my background, I did not grow up in agriculture and and soil and nature restoration. I grew up and had my career in the IT and technology industry, and then transitioned to the satellite services space. And that's what became my calling to a greater purpose with Desert Control as well, because I say that sometimes we're too close to the problems that we face to actually see them. And being able to have that satellite perspective and looking at this planet on what is actually happening, the rate of desertification, of degradation of land, desert spreading. I mean, when you look at it like Lake Chad going from a huge lake to a little pond, that's something we don't see in everyday life. But when you look at that in a time-lapse perspective via satellite, that really made a huge impact on me, together with some experiences I had in the satellite services company I worked in before Desert Control, where I spent some time in places like Western Africa and was exposed to operations together with the United Nations, where one day I just said, I have to do something different. So I jumped off the career path of an executive career where I lived in the US and dived into the more uncertain world of a startup journey with Desert Control, to bring hope to stop and reverse a lot of the desertification and the issues that we're seeing. 52% of all agricultural land worldwide is actually affected by soil degradation, and we're losing 12 million hectares of fertile land to desertification every year. That's actually 2,000 football fields per hour. So if we put them along the Autobahn, you would have to keep 210 kilometers per hour just to keep up as these football fields turn into desert. And that's what I want to do something about. And I know that how to do that is to make a profitable business, stay focused on some key markets in the beginning, build the momentum where the profitability that we drive into Desert Control will fuel our ability to actually expand into these bigger impact markets. So at least those are the qualities and the passion that I bring to the table in this company.
Wow, I mean, that's a great purpose. I didn't know that we have such a so that the desert is growing so fast, right? That you have to drive this fast on the Autobahn to really get away from the desertification. So that's pretty interesting to know. And let's talk a little bit more about how you do that, right? I mean, I picked out two main topics, in my opinion. First of all, that you can save some water for the agriculture industry, and also you can really turn the desert back into green land. So let's maybe start with the agriculture industry. That represents the single largest consumer for water in the world, with accounting for like 70% of water withdrawals. What can you do to save the water for that, and how much water will they need if they need your product, if they use your products?
Yeah, it's a great question, and when we bring our clay minerals to these depleted soils, the first thing it does is that it improves its ability to retain and hold on to water and nutrients, right? So that's also the foundation for turning a desert green, or for improving productivity while allowing for use of less inputs in agriculture and green landscapes and management of any living plants we have in nature, really. So let's start with agriculture. You're absolutely right. It's on a global average 70% of the freshwater withdrawals, and 52% of agricultural land globally is affected by what's called soil degradation. That means that it's lost a lot of its organic matter, and also, as we do industrial heavy agricultural practices, we keep tilling and turning the soil there. Every time we see a tractor on a field with a cloud of dust behind it, that dust is those most important clay particles leaving the soil and going up into the air. We may have heard stories about the Dust Bowl in the United States, and what happened there is like they lost their topsoil, the most important part of the topsoil, blew all over the country and disappeared. So that's the type of mineral enrichment we bring back, and that brings significant water savings. We've proven through independent validation up to 50% reduction of the water requirements needed to grow crops. And that again leads to less washout of other inputs. So think about a farmer. What is it that they have of inputs? Yeah, water, also fertilizers and other inputs that are also becoming increasingly expensive. So when we add 50% less water, we're also washing out way less of these other important inputs. We create a more stable soil ecosystem that leads to higher yields and better crop quality. Also, when we reduce the water consumption, we're also reducing, the stress on water infrastructure, the pumping cost, electricity, and energy spent for this, and just creating an environment where we can achieve more with less. So that's all great, but also we need to remember that agriculture is not necessarily paying so much for the water as of yet. In many places, it's still subsidized. So we're currently working in the Middle East and the United States as our two first launch markets to build the foundation. And even in a market like the United States, agricultural clients are not necessarily paying much for the water. They may pay $20 per acre foot, whereas a landscaping user pays $2,000-3,000 for the same amount of water. But still, we can create a profitable business improvement for them by decreasing the usage of fertilizers and other inputs and improving the yield. That's why we also focus first on high value crops. And then as water becomes either less available or more expensive, we can go broader and broader into all types of crops. But one last point on agriculture, right? It's not necessarily just reducing these costs, but it's also increasing productivity. We live in a time where the global population is also growing. We're going to need to produce more food in the next 40 years than this planet has produced over the last 500. And that means that if we can say that we're actually limited in agricultural production by the amount of water we have today, if we can reduce to half the amount of water needed per food unit, then we can double the areas that are being cultivated and thereby help to achieve these important food security targets.
Well, sounds great. It sounds really, really good. And I think it sounds to me that basically everyone in this industry needs your products. Let's switch to a topic that I'm a huge fan of. To be fair, it sounds really cool and really interesting, fighting the desertification. So we already talked about you can make desert to a green land, basically. But can you tell us in more detail, how does it work? We see great pictures on your website, for example, where you have the desert on the one side and a green field at the other side. But what is necessary, and can you earn money with that?
Yeah, so let me first sort of give a disclaimer that Desert Control as an organization and our mission is not about eradicating deserts, right? Deserts are also important ecosystem that we need to take care of and respect. But as I said, we're seeing increasing desertification and areas turning infertile and turning to desert, and that's where I think it's well worth to spend time on stopping and reversing that. So how does it happen? How do we do it, right? What we do is that we basically take these degraded lands that have turned into desert, and we remineralize them with our LNC process. We come out with mobile production units to the areas that is targeted to reverse desertification of. We bring in some concentrated inputs, clay and mineral inputs that we put into our processing unit and create this liquid natural clay. This liquid natural clay is then applied to the top surface of the desert sand or the sandy grounds. This liquid will percolate into the ground by the force of gravity. And as it percolates in, these clay minerals and particles that we are processing has a unique capability of attaching themselves to every grain of sand throughout that soil structure and creating a soil-like structure of this that retains water and nutrient like a sponge. So one treatment that we apply there will have a rather immediate impact on holding water and nutrients so that we can start to plant and recultivate this area. What we see is that one treatment also lasts for up to 5 years or maybe even longer with maintenance programs. So it's an immediate and lasting impact where we're changing the physical properties of that soil, right? It's a sand, but it's also still a soil function to it, where we're changing the physical property from that to behave like a sand, where all water just disappears straight down, to a water holding capacity where the water and the nutrients are retained in the topsoil near the roots, so that plants and the green ecosystem can utilize it.
Great, that's really interesting. And how do you earn money? I mean, let's talk from an investor kind of view, right? What makes the most money? What can investors expect? I think you already have the first test clients as you wish, and as you already said, you talked about the US, you talked about desert countries. So yes, how much money can you make? I think you're still in an early phase, but what can we expect in the next, let's say, 5 years?
So the key to making money in basically whatever you do is that you have to solve a problem that is worth money solving, right? And the value of solving the problem has to be greater than the cost of the solution that you implement to save it. It's that simple, right? So this is all about understanding the economic feasibility of the various segments. How much value do we add? So if we look at some early pilot programs and small deployments that we've had, we deploy this, for example, to a date farm area in the United Arab Emirates, where we, over the full year there, reduced on average the amount of water needed to cultivate and grow dates with 47%. At the same time, we lowered the needs for fertilizers. So we had economic fertilizer savings, and we achieved a 8% increase in yield. And because of the stabilized soil ecosystem, an even higher increase in the quality of the dates. So we had a 21% increase in the grade A, or the sellable larger sized dates, right? That means that the total value there would give them a return of investment on this in less than 16 months, even if they didn't pay for the water, just by the yield increase and the reduction of fertilizer inputs. So at that, with a sellable price to such a client that give us a 50% gross margin, actually shows a lot of potential for this in the agricultural sector. But, to implement a solution that kind of primarily targets water saving, it can be complex. It also requires some time. We see with the projects we have in the United States, we see similar indications and results actually also from Limoneira as the first commercial deployment there, where they want to test this and see that it holds water over time as well, that these yield improvements and everything is not just a one-time wonder. And agriculture is a conservative market. So we've spent 2 years of piloting with Limoneira before they've now started to do the first commercial rollouts. So we see agriculture is a huge opportunity. It's the largest segment worldwide. We believe we have a solid business case there. It takes time to prove, but in areas where they pay a lot of money for the water, we can get a much faster return of investment for the client and a profitable business proposition also for Desert Control. When we then shift to the landscaping segment, I mentioned in Southern California and in Nevada, they pay, from $2,000 to $3,000 per acre foot of water. There, we see the opportunity to create a good business case for the client with a fairly quick return of investment and a good margin opportunity for Desert Control So those are, I mean, I just wanted to show you sort of how do we create value for the clients that exceed the cost of the LNC, where we can deliver with a decent profitability for Desert Control and create a decent value for the clients. So we're careful about sort of too early start to overinflate expectations and say we're going to conquer the world and it's going to be millions and billions of revenues already next year. We still believe that human nature has a tendency of overestimating how quick things will do and how much you'll do in the short run, but we significantly underestimate what we can achieve in the longer term. So we expect to see licensing revenue from a growing number of projects in the Middle East starting to grow as we're now this year. The early stage commercialization has started. We got all our regulatory approvals in place in the second half of last year. So we anticipate to see a modest revenue growth and development from the Middle East in the coming 12 months here, gradually growing sort of run rate business. And then we anticipate the agricultural conversions of pilots to continue in the US. We saw it took 2 years with Limoneira. We closed 20 other pilots during last year that we see that will have an opportunity towards the end of this year and entering into next year to start to generate similar type of revenue opportunities. And then there is 110 countries in the world with sandy soils and grounds that will have a potential to need our products and services.
Okay, great. That's good to know. Thank you very much. I mean, it's always good not to overestimate what you can achieve within a small time frame. So I think that's good, and that's a fair statement. To summarize, I mean, to me, it sounds that you have an experienced team which has a technical background as well. You already have a first clients, right? So a proof of concept. It's not just an idea. People are actually using your products already. And you do have a go-to-market strategy as you're still a small company. But I think there is a lot of potential, but maybe for other companies as well. So my last question is, do you have competitors? Is it possible that you have the great idea, you have the contacts, but there's another company growing faster, better than you, and takes all your potential clients? Or is the market big enough? Give us a little bit of an idea.
It's always good to have some kind of competition. If not, you risk to be in the position where you have the greatest idea in the world for a problem that nobody needs a solution for, right? So there is definitely other solutions for achieving water conservation in sort of light, sandy, and thirsty soils that are very poor on water retention. There are solutions such as biochar, polymers, hydrogels. There is a lot of different things. And the main competitive advantage that we have is that we're a liquid that can be non-intrusively applied to existing landscapes, right? So I'm not saying anything negative about the competition. I actually see synergistic value for LNC because we are just bringing back a natural element that really belongs in the soil from the first place, which can work very well together with some of these other soil amendments and inputs. But we have a unique advantage because of this liquid. That means for Limoneira in the US now, we're applying this to mature, fully grown citrus trees. So if you were to apply any of these other ones that I mentioned, you would have to take solid state particles and products and put them into the ground, which means you need to remove the trees, put these things into the soil, into the root depth structure, and then replant the trees again. For us, we're actually just applying it as a liquid around the area of the root zone of this tree. It percolates in by the force of gravity, and thereafter you have improved your soil. So we believe that the ability to apply this in the same way that you apply water to the fields means we can apply it through an agricultural irrigation system or through the irrigation and sprinklers on a golf course and help them to achieve half the amount of water spent to keep their playing surfaces in perfect condition is a unique value proposition. But we see that there is also other products and solutions out there.
Ole, thank you very much for giving us a brief introduction into your company, in your product, and in the potential that you see for the future. For the end, is there anything else you would like to add? Is there anything that you would say to our investor community in the end?
No, I would say, as you summarized a bit as well, we have a product and solution that has passed the MVP stage and actually is scalable, industrially grade scalable now. We have 12 years of R&D behind us, followed by 5 years of independent validation and pilot programs as well, demonstrating that it actually holds water in the field over time. We have validation from research institutions in the Middle East, like ICBA, International Center for Biosoil and Agriculture. And 2 years ago, we started our first programs in the US with a 5-year validation program with the University of Arizona as well. So we have academic credentials behind it, strong scientific skills with several PhDs in the area of soil science, soil microbiology, and understanding of what we're actually doing. And we have a scalable concept, right, that is relatively CapEx light because we don't need to build a huge monster factory in each territory. We build these small 20-foot sized mobile production units that actually produce out in the field, which makes it very scalable and very effective. And we have a very passionate team and a good plan. I think the world is full of opportunity. 110 countries need this. But if you're drowning in opportunities, the result of drowning is still the same, a painful death. So we are very focused on these 2 target markets, showing that we can deliver a commercially sound business in the United States and the Middle East and use that as the foundation to go to the rest of the world.
Great. I think that's a great ending. Ole, thank you very much for your time, and I'm looking forward to talking again to you soon.
Thank you very much.